Hello and welcome back. Here we see a nice, clean Commodore 2001 series. And how did it get so clean? Well, with the equivalent of a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, it's the generic brand of Magic Eraser from Shoppers Drug Mart, which I'm sure is probably made, or I'm not sure. I suspect it's made by the same people. So here is the view from below. And it's not incredibly dark in here, but maybe there's a little line there. But really, I mean, there's the magic eraser. And that's after the second go. But you know, you take this to a sink, turn on the tap, rinse it out, it comes back looking awfully white. It does. So, yes, indeed, when I think back, as I do from time to time, I'm pretty sure this is the same kind of machine I first started on when I first discovered little computers like this when I was in high school. I'm pretty sure we did not have the small screen chiclet style with the tape deck built in. We had this machine and it had an external tape deck. And the whole thing sat on a rolling cart, so it could be wheeled here and there. And the data set was on quite a long cable, I seem to remember, and it was on the bottom shelf. The cart only, it was about the height of an average table, and it would have had a kind of a power bar thing attached to it, very secure, like it was made this way. Really, the cart, I think, was made for a film projector or a slide projector or some other thing. But it was adapted because the PET would fit nicely on the top of it. And the cassette thing with its long cable would go underneath. And away you went. So I remember staying late at school to tinker on programs and look at programs, many of them public domain games and other things. Not always, though. But you know what? People sometimes say, oh, games, evil games. But, you know, you never know where someone is going to find their inspiration. And part of the inspiration of the games was, yes, you could play them, but also, because the vast majority of them were in BASIC, you could press the run stop key and stop and go in and look at things and explore. It's almost like, well, I was just thinking, I never thought of it this way, but it was almost like, you know, hey, what do you think's in that cave? I don't know, let's go in and look around. So, you could look and see how things were done, and yes, it was enjoyable to play the game and learn from the game. I remember one of the ones I used to, and I don't know, I gotta look, I've gotta find it, it's gotta be around. It was called, what was it called? It was not the Space Invaders game I showed. It was one where you would have a cannon. And yes, I know, war, evil, guns, evil, yes. But anyway, that was not the point of it. It's kind of like Angry Birds. Angry Birds is not just about dropping things onto things. The mind has to work at this. And it's similar to this game in that you would have to decide what angle and how many bags of powder to reach your objective. And it really was a little trial and a little error. And it was rare you would get it on the first try, but after you played it a while, you could probably kind of look and say, well, I think it's about 45 degrees, and I think this should do. But if it didn't work, when you didn't hit the target, then you could look at what happened and adapt either by angle or powder or both. Try again. Meanwhile, of course, your opponent was trying to do the same, because really you were trying to bomb each other out. And in between you and he or she was a hill or a mountain or some sort of thing to get in the way, and it was generated randomly, so it was always not necessarily, well, it was never the same. It was either higher or lower or wider or thinner or something, so it was kind of like golf in a way. And you know, in a golf tournament, they play 4 days in a row, but it's not the same course, even though it is the same course, because every day they change the hole location. So a whole bunch of it is the same. The fairways are the same. And another thing, they might move the tees a little closer, or they might move them a little farther back. So even though you're playing 18 holes on one day, when you go at it the next day, it's the same 18 holes, but it's not the same. Because the hole location is different. Where you drive from may be farther back, it might be closer, it might be right exactly where it was. But anyway, so it's the same, but not. So when the hill would get generated, I think it was random, and then based on all of that, you would have to gather your wits and gather your experience from what you've done before. And the first one was really quite literally a shot in the dark. And you say, okay, well, I'll try 60 degrees and 10 bags of powder, see what happens, and go from there, and hopefully be able to figure it out before the person you were playing with got it figured out. And I think there might have even been a mode where you could play against the computer. And as I sit here thinking and talking and thinking and talking, I can't remember. Artillery. I think it was called Artillery. Now, do I want to get a big gun out in the backyard here and lob shells over at the neighbor and see how it goes? No, not at all. But just like the games of old, the games of new are thought-provoking and, I was going to say mind-altering. I don't know if they're mind-altering, not necessarily in a bad way, but you never know where someone is going to find their inspiration. For example, today, the Blue Jays are playing in what's called the Rogers Center. Well, the Rogers Center, I don't know why they renamed it. It was first born as the Sky Dome. And I think it was one of the first retractable roof stadiums there was. So that on sunny days, they can play in the outdoors. And if the weather sucks, they can close the roof. But the guy who designed that came up with the idea looking at an orange peel on an airplane. So, is that a computer game? No, it's not. But still, who would think that just because he happened to get an orange or see something, like I don't know if it was his orange, if he stole it from somebody, or he said, I looked over and said, hey, give me your orange peel, and the people looked at him like, he's nuts. But you never know what's going to inspire greatness in somebody. And it might be through a video game. It might be. You just never know. There are lots of other ways. Like, I remember hearing some song, Canadian famous lady ended up doing, and the beat of the song was based on the sound that the cigarette machine in the lobby of the studio made. And she'd never heard this before. I don't think she smoked. think it was Joni Mitchell. She didn't smoke. But somebody, she was out, they were in between sessions or takes or little bits or whatever, and somebody, put in whatever into the cigarette machine and pulled it. Somewhere on YouTube there must be a thing. Anyway, basically these things would sit somewhere, and they would be filled up, and then you'd put in whatever one, and then there were handles at the bottom, and you would quite literally pull them out, which would release what you wanted. And how do I know this? Well, because of course, long ago, even though I never became a smoker, but everybody of course wants to try at some point, there was, I think it was at the Harveys, not far from where we lived, they had a cigarette machine. And of course cigarette machines don't ask how old you are. You just make sure nobody's looking when you pop your money in and pull the handle. But anyway, so the inspiration for the beat or something to do with this song came from the noise of the cigarette machine, the cigarette vending machine. So, in the world of creativity, you never know what is going to be the inspiration for the next big thing. Or a little thing that brings on inspiration from somebody else. You just never know. So, yes, you must limit the time at times, especially we're getting ready to go back to school. You can't just let little people stay up all the time. But it's kind of like somebody once said that, public relations people or whatever. But anyway, some people have said no, even if you've done something bad, or the company's done something bad, or they've screwed up somehow, or there was some recall. They said no, publicity is bad. Because whether it's a good news story, a bad news story, a screw-up story, a recall story, or something or another, it gets your name out there. I don't particularly, completely, totally agree with that. I'm sure Ford Motor Company was really not pleased about the publicity they got over the fact that the Pinto, a little car they made long ago, I kind of liked the looks of it, and one of my teachers had one. If it got rear-ended, there was something about where the gas tank was that made it perhaps tend to catch fire, and that in itself is not necessary. I mean, it's not good, but they really got into more trouble because they decided it was cheaper to pay off the families of the people who died in the fires than to fix the trouble. And that is really not cool. Anyway, so that's where they got the bad publicity. And I don't think that could ever be thought of as good. So like anything in life, there's hardly any absolutes. Anyway, so I'm going to continue to ponder why this PET has its strange intermittent screen failures, which are not a lack of power. It's somehow a lack of the signal from the main board getting up there. Something is a little squirrely. But what? I don't know. But right now, it's still on. It's sitting here. I had it do the... It's doing its counting and printing and such. It's doing its looping thing. I'm leaving it on just to see what happens. I am. And also just reliving some of those early moments of the magic of sitting in a dark room in the back of the computer lab. See, because the PET wasn't out in the room. You'll never guess what we had card punching machines. Yes, computer card punching machines. You would sit down. They were kind of cool in a way. And you would write out your program on these computer cards. And computer cards were basically rectangles with a little notch out of one corner, so I guess you knew which side was what. And you would write your program on them, and then there was a card reader. Aha, why do I mention the card reader? Because the PET was in the same room as the card reader. So people would come in, and they plunk down their cards, and they would get read through, and then their program would run on some big board computer, and then the printout would come back the next day. But the PET, the first PET, was on its computer cart in the back room of the computer lab where the card reader, and I don't remember, it wasn't a big room, there wasn't much else there. And that is where you could sit and tinker and experiment and load programs off of a tape drive, a data set, and save them, and still, it was magical. Especially, say you'd have a tape and you wanted to load, say, artillery of all things, but you didn't know where it was, because there was no counter on the tape drive. So you could type load, quote, artillery, quote, and hit enter, or return. And then it would say, press play on tape 1. Or might have played to press 0, or on tape 0, I don't know. Anyway, you'd press play, and it would say, searching. And you would sit there, mesmerized. Now, if artillery was the first thing it found, it would say, found, artillery, loading. But if there was something else on the tape, it would tell you what it found, and it wouldn't start loading it, of course, because it wasn't artillery. And you would watch with bated breath to see what it would find next, etc., etc. And of course, if you spell artillery wrong, it would find it, but then, because it wasn't spelled right, it wouldn't load it. So, but at least you knew kind of where it was on the tape. And it was ingenious at times. I mean, people with no counters and other things come up with all kinds of ways. And I don't remember ever writing a program to keep track of the time, but I could have. But people would have little lists of things on the tape, and so basically you would rewind the tape to nothing, and then you would say, okay, so if you fast forward this tape for 43 seconds, you should be about there. And so you would. And usually you would, of course, aim on the low side, because it's better to be a little early than late when loading a program. And so people would have whole directories written out like this. And it would be like artillery, 1 minute, 10 seconds. And that wasn't the loading time. That was how much time you fast forwarded the tape drive to get to it. So, yes, those were the great early pioneer days. They were. They were indeed. Anyway, except for the sticker on the front of this machine from Computer Circuit, which was a store in London, Ontario, this could be the same machine. It's not, but it could be. So, thanks for coming. Thanks for taking this trip down memory lane with me. We will continue to experiment with this and many other Commodore machines in the coming days, weeks, months, yes, years. If you have any questions or comments, I am at your service. I will do my best. Bye for now.